Hi, I'm Ravi. In this session, we will check how to launch an AWS instance running with Ubuntu Linux OS and Red Hat Linux OS. Now, requirements to launch instance: need CPU memory, you need disk, OS, user, password to log in. Then, in case if we need an external connectivity, we need a network. And if you want to control services, stop, allow, deny services on this machine, you would need a firewall. Then if you want to name this instance, there's something called tags on AWS, which is optional because every instance is identified with a unique ID, instance ID. Otherwise, we can give an optional name to it as well. Now, this is, and on AWS, so before we connect, we would need AWS subscription. In case if anybody is new to AWS, they can create a free tier subscription, using this link, and start using. Once the subscription is approved, you can start using it. Now, when I want to log into AWS cloud and manage compute there, we need to connect. I already have an AWS subscription here, so we connect to AWS management console, and you can see here there's an option here to console, sign into console. I already have a subscription, so I'm logged in there with my multi-factor authentication. And the service which we would use to launch instances EC2. You can see this is under recently visited category, or you can go to all services, select all services. Under service category, go to compute category and select EC2. Select EC2. Now there's an option on the right hand side to launch an instance. Before that, now on AWS, for CPU and memory, it is referred as instance type. This is nothing but your CPU memory combination. So there are different types of types of instance type available, categorized based on CPU, memory, and disk requirements, as well as network in few cases. Now, depending on your architecture or requirements, workload requirements, you can select for test as well as development or production requirements. Okay, so that's the link to see what are the instances available, instance types available. You can go through AWS documentation and find out the current instances available or allowed on AWS. At the same time, AWS compute is spread across, or AWS infrastructure is spread across different regions. Not every region will have all these instances. So before you select particular compute instance type, make sure that is based on your workload or architecture requirements. At the same time, it is available in that region, whichever region you are trying to launch instances. Now, if I go here, go to launch instance, next step is, if you look at disk, it is referred as a volume on AWS, and OS we have an image available, OS images on AWS repository. For user, there are some default users made available by AWS because we are going to launch Ubuntu Linux as well as Red Hat Linux. Default user with admin equivalent privileges on Ubuntu Linux. The username is Ubuntu, and for Red Hat, default user admin equivalent privileges on Red Hat Linux. Is EC2-user. Okay. Now password, whenever we try to log in, we need a username and password. User we sorted out. That's available when the moment you install, you have these users. Once you log in, you can create your own custom. You can create your own custom users based on your project or workload requirements. Now, for password on AWS, authentication is key-based authentication. Now, for key-based authentication, at the time of launch EC2 instance, you can create your own required key, or you can attach existing key to the new instances. Without key, you would not be able to log in. So it is key-based authentication on AWS. Next is network. For any external connectivity, we would need network. So we will use AWS default for the region available. Whichever region I'm trying to select, I'll use an AWS default. And firewall, on firewall, which is referred as security group on AWS. Every time you launch an instance, there's an option to create a new security group or use an existing one. In this session, I will create a new one. And for tag, every EC2 instance is identified by a unique instance ID. At the same time, we will be allowed, there's an option to create a name to the instance that is referred as a tag. Identifier can be managed by user. Okay. The subscription, I used to have a free tier, but since the free time subscription duration is completed, now I'm on pay-as-you-go subscription, so I'm going to use that. I'm already logged into the machine. Now here, for OS image repository, I'll use Ubuntu and Red Hat Linux. Okay. And this is whatever default is required for Ubuntu Linux as well as Red Hat Unix. I will select those OS drive volumes, disk volumes. So I think for Ubuntu it is 8 GB and Red Hat it is 10 GB. Let me just try to launch and check there. Okay, so go to the portal, web interface, launch instance, give a tag. I'll just say EC2 and Ubuntu first machine. OS image, vendor is Ubuntu, then OS. Version I'm selecting is 24.04, whichever is latest, I'm selecting that one. 24.04. Then, if you want to change, you can change here and confirm the changes. Now, next is instance type. And I am connected to Asia Pac Mumbai region. So, left hand side is the region name, right hand side is the region code. I'm connected to Mumbai region. So, here let me see if T2.micro is available, which has one virtual CPU and 1 GB memory. So that's available in this region. So I'm selecting T2.micro. That would be sufficient to launch a test machine. Okay, so key pair, let me create a new key pair instead of using existing pair. To create a key pair, select new key pair and I'll just say AWS key 1. And confirm. So it will download a copy of PEM file onto your local machine. So you can see in the downloads folder and start using it the moment whenever you want to connect. So on the local machine, go to download folder and see if the copy of key file is downloaded to your local machine. As you can see, I have named the key file as AWS key 1 and the extension is .pem. Now, once key file is selected, I'm going to use a default VPC network, which is network on AWS for this region, default given by AWS. Now, for firewall, either I can select the existing one or I can create a new one. I'll go for create new option. Now, since my machine is Linux type, the service, because I will be connecting from my local machine to AWS cloud. So I would need SSH service to be enabled. Why? Because the connectivity is based on SSH for Linux machines. Okay, now from where I'm connecting, either you can provide your IP, your local machine IP will be selected, but just in case if you change your system and you try to log in, it will be access denied. Reason? Because the firewall is tagged to the instance where your first time you try to log in. So what I would do, I'll select anywhere so that we can log in from anywhere to this machine. So I don't have web software. I will not be installing web services here. So I'll uncheck this box. I just need SSH. Scroll down for disk storage. 8 GB is the default for Ubuntu Linux. I'll use the default values on the right side. You can see the configuration snapshot, the number of instances I would need, one for Ubuntu, and there's an option to launch instance. Select launch. Now scroll down, there's an option to view all instances, select instances. This is one method to go to the dashboard instances. So that's in progress, it's initializing. Now, second machine I would need is Red Hat machine. So I'll go back to, there's an option on the right side, you can see, there's launch instance option, select launch instances. This one, I will use Red Hat Linux with a similar configuration, T2.micro with 1 CPU, 1 GB memory, and default disk space volume. EC2, I'll give a tag name as Ubuntu, Red Hat, and my second machine for this session. And vendor would be Red Hat. Scroll down, select vendor, and it will give the list of images available, commercial as well as free tier images available in this list. And here I will select Linux 10, or if you want to select a lower version, if it is available in the repository, you can use it. Now, if you want to change any versions, there's a drop-down menu. Select and see if you want to change OS versions which you intend to use. Now, let it be as Red Hat Enterprise Linux 10. Scroll down, select instance type. Here again, I would like to use T2.micro, which has one virtual CPU and 1 GB memory. Scroll down, key pair. I will select AWS key 1, which we just created at the time of Ubuntu instance launch. Let me select the same one, scroll down, and I would like to go for second security group, new one. Same, because it's a Linux machine, I can make sure this checkbox is enabled because it will allow SSH services from external connectivity. So from where we are trying to connect from anywhere. It is not limited to one machine or a group of machine. If you want to customize a set of machines, you can still do that. Otherwise, if you want to map it to single machine, go to my IP. Make sure whenever IP changes, that will be a trouble because there will be some configuration change. But if it is anywhere, it can be connected from anywhere. Scroll down. Now for OS volume, the default disk is 10 GB space. And on the right side, this is the configuration snapshot, and I would need one system with Red Hat Linux. Go to launch instance. Once Ubuntu Linux machine and Red Hat Linux machines are launched, okay, and they're available for usage. Second step would be, I would like to connect from my client machine. On client machine, because these are Linux in nature, would need a software emulation software connect from local Windows system, PC, desktop, laptop to AWS EC2 instance running with Linux OS, any Linux OS. So here I'm using Git Bash. Okay. Now Git Bash is already installed and I have key file available. So let me try to connect. Now if I want to connect to, let me select and open a new tab. So here I have the similar service available displayed in two tabs. So I'll select one machine on one tab and second machine on another tab. So under recently visited, go to EC2 and dashboard. Under dashboard, you should be able to see instances running at this moment under this subscription in this region. Okay, so first tab, I will use it for Ubuntu. Second tab, I'll use it for Red Hat. Now, if I want to connect to Ubuntu machine, select Ubuntu and go to connect option. Select a connect. The connectivity is based on SSH client. So go to SSH client tab and there's an example connection string given. If you read this connection string from left hand side to right hand side, what is the connection method? SSH. What is the key? Identifier key would be this key. And with what user? Ubuntu user. Where is this user available? On this machine. Okay, so there's a copy button here. Copy. Now launch a git bash terminal session on your local machine. So go to downloads folder and you can see the key file which is downloaded at the time of Ubuntu machine launch today. So same key file I'm using for Red Hat as well. So right click in the open space in the downloads folder and launch a git bash terminal. So show more options, git bash here. Now left hand side terminal, I will use it for Ubuntu. Right hand side terminal, let me launch one more terminal with so that I can use it for Red Hat connectivity. Okay, now connection string copy for Ubuntu. Go to left hand side terminal, select and copy. Now I can, if you see here, I'm trying to launch git bash session from the folder where my key file is available. The reason is because the connection string will look for this key files which is available locally. If I don't launch it from the folder where key file is available, we have to give absolute path or relative path where key file is available. That just to avoid further steps, just to avoid the complexity, I launched my git bash session from the folder key file is available. Connection. If connectivity is proper, if firewall is enabled, you will see an option here to confirm, continue, press type yes, and you're logged into Ubuntu machine. Now, similarly, if you want to connect to Red Hat machine, select Red Hat, go to connect button at the top. There will be a connection string, SSH connectivity string, copy, and go to second terminal, paste, and connect. If SSH is enabled in the firewall associated to the instance, you will be able to log in. Just to reconfirm the versions, go here and type cat etc OS release. You can see the version which we have launched on AWS instance, and same on Red Hat as well, cat etc OS release. You can see this is the version which we are using on our Red Hat instance. Disconnect from this machine, type exit and disconnect. Because I will not be using these machines because these machines are test machines. So I can delete these two machines. Delete on AWS terminology is terminate. Select these two instances, go to instance state. There's a terminate, delete instance option, select, and make sure the data is stored in appropriate place before you delete any of the development or production machines. For test environment, it's okay, but in any case, make sure data is secured. Select delete. If data is available, make sure data is secured before delete or terminate is selected. Now we can see two machines are going through shutdown process. Since it's a test environment, I have selected both machines together to terminate. But in a regular environment, make sure you select one machine at a time. Follow the approved documentation steps to terminate any of these instances. Okay. Thank you.